Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of the Revenue Innovation Series. I'm Dan Murdoch, your gracious and humble host. It's my privilege to welcome a very special guest, Chris Ensko, co-founder and CEO of Rippl. Rippl is a new kind of mental health company that's pioneering a new care model to dramatically expand access to high-quality mental health care for seniors, their families, and caregivers. Chris, welcome to the program.
Dan, thanks for having me.
Of course. Love to kick off by you giving us a bit of an introduction to you and your role at Rippl and what sort of inspired you to build this company.
Well, I have the privilege of leading the team as the CEO of Rippl. I founded the company with another woman named Inka Dietrich, who we kind of came together through Arch Ventures when we started working on this about a year ago, and she's been a great co-founder as we put this company together. I'm not a traditional healthcare entrepreneur, to be honest. I spent most of my career, actually, my professional career at Starbucks. I was there for almost 17 years. And it's interesting, I actually worked on healthcare. Starbucks was an innovator in healthcare. It was the first, significant retail employer to really offer comprehensive healthcare to all of its employees, part-time or full-time. And we kind of innovated around healthcare early on, and I got to be a part of that. And that kind of sparked an interest early on. And then I would never imagine that one day I'd get to actually go found a healthcare company. But it was always in the back of my head that that would be, kind of a remarkable thing to do. And we did have mission at Starbucks, but the mission in healthcare, where you really got life and death every day, the opportunity to impact someone's life was very compelling. And so when I left Starbucks a few years ago, I decided that I was going to get into healthcare. And like a lot of us in this business, some of my personal life impacted that, because about that time, both my parents had very near misses with the healthcare system. And I was shocked, like a lot of us. And I thought, gosh, surely it's not really like this. Surely it could be better. And between that and sort of seeing, through that experience, what's coming, what's ahead of us, especially in healthcare around the aging population, I decided I was going to jump into senior health, and that's what I did. Rippl is the product of a number of experiences. So when I left Starbucks, I went to run a company called Aegis Living, which is a fairly sizable assisted living company here on the West Coast. Takes care of a very high acuity group of seniors in congregate care, true senior living. And it was while I was there during COVID that I had this, pretty profound experience, right? Having walked into caring for some of the most frail seniors anywhere in the country, many of them with cognitive conditions, at a time when we were probably dealing with the most significant public health challenge in the history of the country, or maybe the world, frankly. So that was a profound and very humbling experience. And it really wedded me to my decision to go into senior care, which was so different from where I'd been. But it really convinced me that, caring for people at this stage of their lives was really noble work. And I was inspired by that and leaned in. And as I got into it, what I realized was there were many things that I saw, being in senior care that, frankly, I was shocked by. I oftentimes say, that I don't know if in America we like older people very much, because if we did, we'd have far better resources and care for them. Of all the things that I saw during that time, I was most shocked by the number of times we were sending residents to the ER because we couldn't manage their behavioral health symptoms related to dementia. And that was true for, I think, any provider out there. This was a common problem. And in fact, ERs are unfortunately filled with older people that are there for cognitive conditions. And really, many of those visits are unnecessary. But the reason they're there is because there's no one to call. So really, that was where the catalyst for Rippl came from. We saw the opportunity to give people, with these conditions, and their families and their caregivers, because they're central to solving this, give them a resource to call when they're struggling And inevitably that's going to happen when you're dealing with cognitive issues. And keep them out of that ER, because once they get to the ER, I can cite lots of statistics, but once they get to the ER, all the dominoes fall the wrong way. ERs are not equipped to deal with people with cognitive conditions generally. Oftentimes, once you get to the ER, 75% of the time, you're going to be admitted to the hospital. And ultimately, when you get out of that hospital, you're going to be more frail, you're not going to be better, the outcomes are going to be worse, and the costs are going to be extraordinary. So Rippl is about creating a service that allows people to stay at home comfortably and have someone to call. And it sounds so simple, but in many ways, I think that's why it's so effective.
You're filling a very important void in care, clearly, with seniors. And we're proud to be partnered with you and certainly helping you continue to further that mission. We're also raving Starbucks fans at Adonis, so you have us on two fronts.
A lot of coffee.
Yes, indeed. I run certainly on caffeine, and much of the rest of the Adonis team does as well. You've mentioned on your website and in other communications that senior living and care is broken fundamentally, and you mentioned a number of those details before, but is there more to this problem that is being addressed by Rippl, indirectly or directly through your services and the care that you're trying to give?
Well, let me just speak to why it's broken in our space, right? Because I'm sure we can find lots of ways to talk about where healthcare may be broken. The reason this care doesn't exist the way it should today in our space, and when I say our space, really seniors that are challenged with neurocognitive diseases, particularly dementia and Alzheimer's being the big one. Three reasons. One is, as many of us know, right, our fee-for-service payment system doesn't really work very well. I mean, it favors volume over outcomes, and that's very true in our space, right, where our fee-for-service system just doesn't pay holistically for this kind of care. That's problem number one. Number two is, despite the fact that we've got a fairly robust primary care network out there, many primary care physicians are not deeply trained in dementia, and I think that's broadly driven by the fact there is no cure. It's a kind of unpredictable disease, and many primary care operations don't always feel comfortable treating it. So it maybe doesn't get the attention it deserves in certain circumstances. The last thing and the most important issue here that we're trying to solve for is the gigantic, and I mean gigantic, lack of clinicians that know how to care for seniors that have these conditions. From geropsychiatry all the way down to sort of just care coordination in this space, there are just hardly anyone who knows how to do this. So part of what we're doing at Rippl is we are hopefully assembling some of the most talented clinicians in this space who are licensed to provide this care and deeply experienced, but also deeply passionate about this population, right? And then the other half of the equation is how do we invite other clinicians from other complementary disciplines? It might be hospice or palliative care, and bring them into this space and train them and get them proficient in what we do quickly. Because the need here is going to be gigantic, and we know that, and we're already behind. We've got to get prepared for what's the reality of what we're going to deal with, which is going to be a very large number of seniors with these needs.
What does that look like statistically speaking? It's an aging population. Do you guys have a sense for exactly what that tidal wave looks like?
I mean, the statistics are pretty staggering. I think that oftentimes we don't always acknowledge what's coming. And I think particularly in this space, it's something we talk about a lot, because if you really get your head around the challenge ahead, right, it is a big incentive for us to get urgent, and we are very urgent. I'll just share a few things with you, right? So we, for the first time in not too many years from now, are going to have more seniors than we are young people. The first time that's ever happened in American history. So we're getting ready to see a very big change in, the way we deliver healthcare. And I tell my 13-year-old daughter all the time, I said, you better like healthcare, because that's what you're going to do. For this space particularly, right? So 1 in 4 seniors today deals with some kind of mental or behavioral health condition, which is pretty amazing. I mean, 25-30% of our seniors out there are living with one of these conditions, and dementia is a big piece of it. Alzheimer's, which is the largest, the biggest part of dementia, about 90%. Today, there are somewhere between, roughly 7 and 8 million people that are diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and then a few more with, broadly dementia. That number is going to double over the next few years. And I think what's most staggering is, so if you're age 85 today, you got a 1 in 3 chance of having just Alzheimer's, right? Which is a big piece of dementia, but still not all of it. So 1 in 3 chance. And in the next just few years, we will see our first 85-year-old boomer. And as we all know, there are lots of boomers that are going to come along and they're going to turn 85. And I think this need is going to grow exponentially, and we're not ready.
And to that point that you made before, it sounds like there's this holy trinity of sorts between value-based approach, improving clinicians, and then a technology innovation that's necessary to sort of combine to improve upon this problem or to prepare for what's to come. Is it those 3 things, and Rippl sort of forging a path to upholding, or interconnecting those 3? Is that a good way to describe it?
Well, I'm never going to be. We're young. We just started this company last year. We're learning quickly, but what we think are the core components of, being an innovator in this space are a few things. First, we have to do this value-based, right? We have to come at the payer model in a way that rewards, health outcomes alongside cost outcomes. We know that's the only way we're going to build a holistic model to really deliver for these patients. The second thing is this is tech enablement. This is a place that we can absolutely bring. Adonis is a great example, right? Bring tech to the table to help us do these things, smarter, better, faster. The last thing, I'd say the last thing are combined. It's 2 things. The last thing is care model, right? So we're using at Rippl a collaborative care model that's been experimented with over the last few years. Our care model was inspired by some work that was done at UCLA and the University of California at San Francisco that really innovated in this dementia space by pulling together some, what is really a virtual care pod of a nurse practitioner, a licensed social worker, and a care coordinator working together to really get to know a patient, to follow them, to be integrated with their primary care physician, and really do a lot of things that primary care physician couldn't do. And that care model, though, is only enabled by great people. And I think that's the main message, which is you can have a great payer model, you can have a great care model, you can have a great, amazing technology, but it really comes down to the clinicians. And that is such a core focus for us, and maybe very different than lots of other healthcare companies. We've got this simple idea that if we empower and enable our clinicians and, give them the tools, the training, the capability, the time, which I think is often underestimated, to go out and give the right care to these patients, they're going to do the right thing every time. And that's how we come to work every day, is empowering our teams and being kind of obsessed with their experience as much as we are the patient experience.
That's incredible. And I think there's this harmony between people and technology that will always exist, right? And I think Adonis is certainly a good example of that. What you just provided is a great example of that. Revenue cycle management and the challenges with billings and collections seems to be at times at odds between technology and people, and of course the operational realities of a particular provider. What's your view on revenue cycle management and billing collections, and what's the problem, and maybe what's in your world or in your definition the solution?
Well, I think finding Adonis was a great thing for us. We're healthcare entrepreneurs, and yes, of course, that has to involve billing and coding, which is you can't discuss without mentioning the word complexity, because this is a very complex space. And one thing we decided early on was we needed a partner in this space, a strategic and a tactical partner. And we chose Adonis for lots of reasons, but what Adonis mostly allows us to do is to go out and focus at what we're best at, which is really innovating our care model, recruiting clinicians, and figuring out this value-based thread the needle challenge we've got. And we let your team worry about all of the other things. I think Adonis very early was helpful in helping us figure out our billing strategy, which I think sometimes gets underestimated, how complex that can be, especially in a collaborative care model like ours, where we are combining medical codes alongside behavioral health codes. That's not really done today. And that's a place we're innovating, and we needed a partner that was very, very familiar with how things work in the background there. And then there's the tactical aspects of, so it frees up our team to go focus on, again, what we're best at. And we still don't need to worry about, we still get paid. We get paid on time. We get paid in full. Like some of the basics that, frankly, we don't have time to think about. So I'm grateful to Adonis for both your strategic help, but also the tactical help. And I think the technology obviously is unique and is allowing us to automate all that. We don't want to build a big team in-house to do that. It's just not it's not really in our interest.
And that's precisely how we want to partner with folks, to put you and other providers in a position to focus on the North Star, right? The patient experience and all the other stakeholders that exist within the delivery of that experience, of helping, whether it's a senior deal with some of these challenges they're having from a mental health perspective or otherwise. I think we all have maybe personal connections to that with either our parents or our grandparents, and I identify with your guys' mission. So I thank you in turn for focusing on such an integral part of our society.
You don't go to, I say this all the time, you don't go to a dinner party, you don't go to your kid's baseball game, you don't go anywhere where if people know you're involved in working with seniors, these issues don't come up. I mean, this is going to be the conversation that we're going to have as a society for a long time to come. And actually, I mean, it's very, I enjoyed talking about coffee for a long time, but to be in something that is so relevant right now. I mean, our grandparents, our parents. It's pretty fulfilling. I mean, to be able to help people, and that's the way we, all of the team at Rippl have been caregivers at one point or another for someone with dementia. And I think that's initially what bonded us all together. And as much as I hate to say it, it's not hard to find people with that experience because everybody's got a story. We say it all the time.
It's galvanizing and purpose-driven. There's no doubt about that. Are there other challenges that you view as a provider and as an organization that are things that keep you up at night relative to achieving your mission? Is there anything that comes to mind in particular?
Everything keeps me up at night as an entrepreneur. But I think the big ones are really, I'd go back to people. I think that so much of our work every day is really focused on the culture of our company. And again, grateful to, our partners like Adonis that allow us the time, frankly, to go focus on what we think is most important. And again, for us at Rippl, that is building the platform, place, and culture that if you're drawn to this space and you've got that license to serve, this is the only place you want to work. That's the nirvana, right? And we're young. I mean, we just started. But that's the culture we're trying to build. And if there's anything that keeps me up at night most, there's a long list, but it's being able to create that environment. We read in the newspaper every day. I mean, it's on the front page of any newspaper any one day. Burnout, stress. People. Nurses, doctors. Exiting healthcare, and it's a legit trend and one we have to be deeply worried about because just as we're going into a time when we're going to need more providers than ever before, we got people exiting the industry and really for completely avoidable reasons, right? We've just got to be realistic about, we've got to build care models around these clinicians. They are our future, and that's certainly what we're doing at Rippl.
The macro and the micro are certainly compounding upon one another to make this a very urgent need to have area of focus. And we continue to see this with many of our customers and partners where There's challenges around talent acquisition and labor and compliance and regulatory environments. It's only going to get more challenging, and the more that we can focus on driving innovation, I think the better, certainly. If you were to look back 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and look and envision what Rippl was sought to achieve, what does that look like for you?
Wow, that's a giant question. You thought about that for a little while. I think I don't want to predict the future because I'm not very good at that. But what I would say is, look, our dream is to build, the biggest national network of the best trained, highest integrity, most passionate clinicians that know this population better than anyone else, and really be able to touch a family, a patient, a caregiver, and do what we said we're going to do, which is allow them to stay at home as long as possible and live a healthy life. I think, for some reason, dementia has developed in this very dark corner of healthcare, right? If you get a dementia diagnosis, wow, it's the end. What are you going to do? There's no cure. And that's just the opposite of what's possible. We see ourselves as enabling, I say this all the time, dementia diagnosis is not the end of life. It's probably a pretty stark reminder, though, that you got to get your bucket list going, right? And how do we come in and help you and your family manage that disease? Because it is manageable in many ways for lots of years sometimes. And I hope that we can give families, light where there's some darkness, right? Come at this confidently, optimistically, with some hope. And allow them to do what they want to do and live the life they want to do, and spend time with their grandkids, right? Just the stuff that matters. The other thing that's happening that I think is worth mentioning is, right, for the first time in a long time, maybe 20 years, in these last few months, we've seen some really positive, optimistic news around therapeutic development in this space, especially for dementia. And I think that's encouraging. I don't know how fast it will happen, but I think there's more optimism in this space than ever before, and I think that's kind of helping lift the focus on this. Because one of the big problems with, I think, cognitive difficulties when you're an older person is stigma. Whereas young people, COVID really has opened this up in a very big way to make it okay to seek help. That's not the case with seniors. It's still heavily stigmatized. I come from a rural part of America in Arkansas where, people just are not going to raise their hands and say, I need help. And it's been okay because there's no help to be had. But as we make this care accessible and we give people the opportunity to reach out, we've also got to make it okay to ask for help with this population. And I think that's another, dream of mine as a company, that we can play some role in, getting rid of the stigma here, right? Because there's no reason, maybe at the, one of the best parts of your life when you're at the far end of the journey and you can really reflect on all you've done and the life you've lived, this doesn't have to be, you can get care and it'll make your life better, and that's part of our dream at Rippl too.
Incredible. Extremely inspiring, Chris, and I just want to thank you again for participating in the episode. And if you'd like to get in touch with us or with Chris, certainly come to adonis.io or feel free to email into marketing@adonis.io. Chris, thanks again.